I think, it might have to do with cop shit, because I've definitely heard lots of stories about, cops having to like go to roofs because people are just shooting guns into the air at night on roofs for no reason.
Yep. I mean, I grew up in a place where that was very common. All right, we're live. I think we're good to go. So I'm just going to get started. Move this little metadata marker. It's Monday, May 16th, 2022. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we're talking about scanners. So, against all odds, but at the same time, not implausible, because one way you could describe this, on one hand, it's rare for a team in a sport to be down significantly in a playoff and then come all the way back to win that playoff series. The Rangers were down 3-1, but 4 games won the series, and then they won 3 games in a row, and they advanced.
We weren't down 3-0, though. We were
That's
down
true.
3-1.
That is true.
But I mean, this has happened before with the Penguins before.
Yep.
But at the same time, the Penguins were like undefeated in away game 7. So it was like both teams had a streak, and one of them was going to break. And somehow, miraculously, despite their team being the better team by far, playing better than us by far, they did not win, because that's how games do.
Yep.
But there's factors, things happen.
I got to say, it was... This was the first time I saw 3 overtimes in any hockey game in person, let alone a playoff game. I always imagined it would be extremely interesting and fun, and it was, but it was also not extremely fun to leave that arena after midnight on a work night.
Yeah, but that was game 1.
That was game 1. We were filled with optimism. Like, all right, they lost the game, but in a ridiculous overtime. And then game 2, they crushed.
Yeah, the 2 games I went to, we won.
The game 5.
I didn't go to any losing games.
The game that you and I went to that we assumed we weren't going to say out loud. We were just sort of expecting it to go badly. It was going very badly, and then somehow it reversed itself and became one of the more exciting hockey games I've ever seen in my life in person.
Yeah, well, I'm expecting now for us to, if we get swept, I'll be like, all right, that's what I...
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say this. We get to see at least 4 more hockey games where the New York Rangers are playing. And that is a fine reward when the alternative is none more games.
None more would have been fine, too, because it's now summertime, and I don't really need hockey so much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you say that, but I'll unsay that if somehow the Rangers make it to the finals. Suddenly, I will care a lot about there being summer hockey.
I just don't think that's going to happen, so it's okay.
I feel like Scott has to say he doesn't think it'll happen, because you can't hope if you're a New York sports fan.
You can't be disappointed if you weren't appointed.
Exactly. Now, New York sports fans are not like Leafs fans, but we'll see we'll see how this goes. So, in some news, we're not going to talk about the whole Twitter Musk thing, because every single update to that story just gets stupider and stupider, and it doesn't even matter. But I'm pretty confident nothing's going to change. Nobody's buying Twitter. This whole thing
happens until it's over and final and, actually done, then nothing, right?
Yep. But I do have an opening bit. Today was biking home from work, like I do. I was gonna bike home. I go outside.
You went from opening bit to news.
I did. I went from opening bit.
You're not gonna do a news. It wasn't even a news. It was, we're not gonna do this news, and then you went back to the opening bit section.
I did, because I forgot to talk about the opening bit, and also that wasn't a news. It was an anti-news, which is relevant to my thing of the day.
Okay, so you're getting way ahead of yourself. With things of the day here. Keep the order straight.
So, pouring rain in Midtown, and then it was sunny again. And I look out the window, and I think, you know what? I bet I could bike home. So I go outside in Midtown. It's totally sunny. And there is one, it was almost like a cartoon. There's one big dark storm cloud surrounded by sunny blue sky. And this big storm cloud is moving around Midtown like a UFO. And there's a sheet of rain under it and nowhere else.
You sure that wasn't just like Dr. Wiley or something?
It might have. I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Wiley. So So I look and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna chance it. So I get on a city bike and I start biking, and then the wall of water is like following me, but slowly in the distance. So it's a race against time, race against the clock. Will it get me or won't it get me? And I'm staying like pretty well ahead of it. It's a few blocks behind me, but I can see it back there, like slowly approaching. I get on the bridge. I'm going over the bridge. And it's starting to come up the bridge behind me. Like there is rain. I look back. It is raining behind me. I am not being rained on yet. I'm trying to pump. I'm huffing and puffing now because I really don't want to get rained on. It was a extreme rain. A few super slow people were biking, and I had trouble getting past them. The rain started to get me a little bit, but I got my way around them. I got past the rain again, so I was barely rained on. I made it home to the city bike dock at the base of the bridge. Rain is not there. I am way ahead of the rain. I made it. There were no open docks in the fucking city bike dock. And in the time it took me to bike to another dock, the rain washed over and I got soaked.
Yeah. Okay.
I left a 2-star review with City Bike on that ride, and I wrote a little note saying, please put more docks everywhere.
Okay.
All right, so you got any news?
There was an eclipse yesterday. I don't know where in the world you could see it from.
Everywhere. Lunar eclipses are visible everywhere the moon is visible. They're not like solar eclipses.
But yeah, the moon was not visible everywhere though.
But if the moon was visible in the place you were, you could see this eclipse.
Right, but yeah, so the Earth was in between the sun and the moon, and the Earth's shadow was over the moon. But also, this was a blood moon, so it was a red moon. And
Link.
It was a full moon, or fullish moon.
Yep.
Right.
It might have technically been waning gibbous, but it was close enough to full.
I don't know. But also, it was a total eclipse. It wasn't like one of those partial eclipses where you can see like just passing over part of the moon. It was like the whole fucking moon was gone, right?
It was pretty impressive. We wanted to go on the roof to look at it, but the building had like already locked up the roof for the night. So we went onto the street, and all the buildings are in the way. But we found a spot on the street under the subway where we could see it, and it was a really good angle.
I couldn't see it because the building across from me was in the way out the window.
We spent about 20 minutes walking around outside, so we find an angle to see it through the buildings.
I just saw it on the roof. Anyway. So yeah, that was a thing.
Yeah.
Other news. What was the other news?
NVIDIA did something that a younger Rim would have been really excited about.
Oh, yeah, right.
But current Rim is shocked that this happened and also can't imagine any reason why anyone would care.
I mean, there's reasons to care. So if you don't know about this drama, right? People who run Linux computers which have NVIDIA GPUs in them, NVIDIA has, for a very, very long time, since we were in college, maybe even longer, right, made an official NVIDIA GPU driver for Linux as well as Windows, right? And that driver... on Windows, it's like you install drivers, right? As like this separate thing. There's like they're files, right? Then you can just dynamically add drivers to Windows, right? Linux, it doesn't work that way. There's the Linux kernel, and you can compile hardware. The Linux kernel has support for hardware just in it. And if you actually go to compile the Linux kernel, it's open source, right? So you can just download the source code and compile it into the binary file, right? It's just a binary file when you're done compiling it. When you compile it, there's like this menu config. You can also do a text file config, but basically you choose which parts you want to build and which parts you don't want to build. So it's like if you know exactly what computer this kernel is going to go on, you can include just the parts you need for that computer and cut out all the other parts that are just going to take up space on your hard drive, which is usually not a big deal because computers have so much storage space. You can just build a giant kernel with everything in it and it'll work on like every computer almost, or there's lots of things in it. But if you're doing some embedded application with like a 16 gigabyte flash, you need to make a really tiny kernel, right? But your video card drivers, as well as all your other drivers, are just in there, right? However, there's also kernel modules, which are ways that you can add and remove things from the kernel while it's running, like support for hardware and whatnot. Dynamically, similar to what you do on Windows, but not quite exactly. And those are effectively, you can consider them to be like drivers. They're not exactly the same, right? We don't need to get into those details. What is important is that the official NVIDIA driver for, as long as I can remember, was a closed source thing, right? They weren't open sourcing their driver, right?
Yep.
No way. And this was a problem because it meant that if you were going to say install a Linux on the distribution on your desktop computer, say Ubuntu or Red Hat or whatever, Fedora.
I didn't forget.
All right, those distributions, those people making those Linux distributions could not legally distribute the NVIDIA driver to you. They couldn't include it on their CD-ROM or USB stick or their ISO.
Now, a nerd could deal with this in a bunch of ways, but
they couldn't offer downloads of it on their website, right? So what they would do is you would, for example, if you installed Ubuntu on your laptop and it had an NVIDIA GPU in it, there would be like a pop-up that was like, hey, we see you got an NVIDIA GPU. We're currently using this open source driver. You want the NVIDIA one? Click on some yes and click on some license agreements, and then this program will go to the NVIDIA website, get the closed source thing, then there's like a module, there's like an open source module that just sort of shims the closed source driver into the kernel to make it work.
Now, this pretty much did work most of the time.
Yeah, it worked. It worked as far back as college, but it was an extra step. And also,
but more importantly, I'd say one population of people who use Linux on the desktop were more than happy to just click to make it work. And the other population of Linux on the desktop people are ideological purists who either refused to do this on moral grounds or otherwise freaked out about it and would make huge stinks about it.
There are also practical reasons, right? Most people are not using Linux on the desktop. We know that already, right? It's like someone is using some supercomputer with maybe not for coin mining, for something legitimate, render farm, something like that, right? Or CUDA, some machine learning, and they got this NVIDIA, they got a bunch of GPUs, right, from NVIDIA in this machine, and the driver is not open source, and they don't know what it's doing, and then now they need to optimize their workload or whatever in this, industrial application, who knows? And they can't because they don't know what the fuck that driver is doing, right? It's some closed source thing. So there are legitimate reasons to want it to be open source that are just not relevant to RIM, whose only purpose is I just want the GPU to work.
That's that. And especially because that is, desktop Linux is not a majority use case now, even less so than it was back when we last talked about Linux on the desktop.
Right. There's also, people who are very Linux knowledgeable, and they could actually, make improvements to the driver, but not just the driver. Even if they don't modify the driver, in seeing how it works, they could optimize other open source software like desktop environments, video player, anything that uses the GPU can now be optimized better. I don't think people realize, this is not an exaggeration, that NVIDIA on Windows works very closely with the publishers and developers of major games and major game engines. If obviously I've never seen the NVIDIA driver source code for Windows, right? It's not an open source thing, but it's common knowledge that there's basic code in that driver that's if
Counter-Strike, do X.
Running is Call of Duty, do this. If the software that is running is Doom Eternal, do that. It's they code that shit into the driver to handle all those fucking games on Windows doing weird stuff, right?
And imagine what could be done if a lot more eyes were on that actual code.
Anyway, so NVIDIA, after how long? 20 fucking years, right?
I never, ever in my life thought this would happen because their main argument was our drivers have proprietary trade secrets that would be a competitive disadvantage. We can't share them. I never imagined there would be a universe where if that were true, that would change. So either that was never true or something's different about NVIDIA and their business model or what they think is dangerous to them competitively.
I don't know, but they released an open source driver. It's alpha, right? Fully open source driver, which means if you have an NVIDIA board in your computer and you can now install Linux distribution, and that it would just work. You wouldn't have to click on an extra thing, right? You just have perfect GPU acceleration out of the box, assuming it works. but it's an alpha. And it's it's hard to say. It's like, well, is this literally the same driver? What was removed from it? What was added to it? Right? Who knows? I haven't looked at it. I haven't read enough about it. But still, releasing an open source GPU driver for NVIDIA GPUs on Linux is a kind of a big deal.
Yep, it's a big deal, even though you won't see the obvious direct fruits of it unless you pay attention. There will be fruits of this for many people.
One area that I think consumers in consumer devices that are not Linux on the desktop people might see a benefit from this is somebody could now distribute a device. They could produce a phone or something, right? And put NVIDIA chips in it with running Linux. Android is Linux, right? And include this driver, right? And distribute this driver, right, in their product when they, right? Whereas now, if you were to make a phone, let's say I made a phone, last month, and I made the phone, and the phone had an NVIDIA GPU in it, and I put Linux on that phone as the OS, and I tried to sell you that phone, I couldn't sell you the phone with the driver on there. I would have to, the person, would have to do some bullshit to get the right? But now I can do it. Now I can sell you a device with an NVIDIA GPU in it that runs Linux, that's already working, at whatever capacity. So now you might see some new hardware hit the scene, right? That runs, Linux, obviously not desktops and laptops, but, tablets, phones, other kinds of devices, right? That have NVIDIA GPUs and run Linux on them.
Yep, and it looks like it's a dual GPL and MIT license. So this is like a real open source release. This isn't one of those LGPL limited nonsense things.
Nope.
In some other news, so obviously the war in Ukraine is a ridiculous tragedy. I cannot stress that enough. But a very interesting thing has happened. As you may have seen, if you're paying attention to the news, Russia's war aims have mostly failed. Like the literal thing they were trying to prevent, Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Finland and Sweden are now joining NATO, and they've lost almost all the land they took from Ukraine. But their military collapsed. And what happened, apparently, and there's an article about this here that has on the drive that's a pretty good detail. In the chaos of the Russian military collapsing, retreating, and losing between 25 and 33% of all the troops they committed, they abandoned and left behind in Ukraine a rare and extremely advanced, for the Russian military at least, electronic warfare system. All modern militaries have these things, but basically they're like a truck or a container or something filled with a ton of technology that is used to do things like jam radar, disrupt enemies' signals intelligence, fuck with GPS systems, protect your own troops from other armies trying to do this to you. Like electronic warfare. Go read the Wikipedia article on it if you want to learn more. I'm not an expert. But Ukraine has Russia's most advanced known electronic warfare system, apparently. And they it wasn't just a booby trap thing? Nope. It looks like it was the truck that was carrying it was attacked by Ukrainian forces, and the Russian forces appear to have died and or fled. It's not exactly clear. It wasn't a ruse where they made a fake electronics warfare platform to make you think that that's what their capabilities were, when actually it was just, well, it's the Krasuka 4 system, which its existence and its capabilities are already well known to Western intelligence. Okay. So, but now we have one. Ukraine is apparently... It's not a secret spying thing where like, it's actually spying on you and you try to use it. I mean, if that were true, props to the Russian military. But based on everything else that has happened to the Russian military, a real story or just some website? No, this is a pretty. There's multiple confirmations about this, and it looks like they're delivering it to the United States to study. Okay. So this is an aspect of warfare, this kind of technology that war fanboys don't even think that much about, and it's arguably one of the most important aspects of modern warfare is the electronic and signals intelligence part of that warfare. And there's just a really interesting story, and you can read all the cool details of how these systems work and how we use them. And the broader picture here is that Russia does have very advanced equipment, But due to the failings of their logistics and operations, they're either not deploying that equipment, or where they're deploying it, it is being destroyed or otherwise failing to achieve any goals. And this is just one more example of that is just particularly egregious. This could be a significant setback to Russia's military for decades to come, because they don't appear to have the capability to design better systems to do this kind of thing.
How are they so good at hacking everyone's computers?
They're not. In fact,
ransomwares.
If you haven't noticed, since the war began, Russian state-sponsored hacking attacks on the rest of the world spiked briefly and then basically all but dried up. Meanwhile, counterattacks against Russian assets that previously never really happened have been happening at a staggering rate. It looks like Russia's cyber warfare machine is, one, largely outside of Russia and funded by Russian money, and when they couldn't pay people anymore because of the sanctions, everyone just stopped doing it. And two, the parts of it that were very effective are information warfare, like troll bots and bot farms and sentiment nonsense and fake news, and a lot of that is becoming less and less effective because it hit saturation. Meanwhile, 5 days ago, unknown forces hacked Russian state TV and replaced all the programming notes with anti-Putin propaganda, and they also hacked one of the main Russian news sites and replaced all the articles with actual articles from the West about what's happening outside of Russia.
Nope, I don't know if that's true, because it's not like I'm watching Russian TV to find out.
Oh, that was confirmed. That was confirmed by MSNBC and CNN.
All right.
I think that's all our news is. Oh yeah, one more.
How many minutes do we need here?
We can skip. We can talk about the 4090 later, I guess.
It's not that. I mean, it's still a rumor, right?
All right. Put a little marker, because I'm going to make this episode with good metadata just to test my own pipeline of generating that metadata quickly. I opened a feature request to Adobe because, get this, you'd think an obvious feature of a very advanced marker system in audio editing software would be to be able to peg a marker to a particular track. So if I have a marker of like when we started the things of the day and I drag the tracks around, it would follow at least one of those audio tracks. Such a feature has never existed in Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened a feature request before it. The ticket, my ticket was merged with a ticket from 2008.
Yep.
Thousands of people have been asking for this, and it looks like they're never going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they're still working on the stupid color blending being correct.
Yep, but they're working on that at least.
Well, I don't know if they are or not.
It appears that they are. I saw
It seems to be in demand from a lot of artists.
Yep.
Especially since other apps are doing it. So.
All right. Anyway, let's put a little marker here But anyway, things of the day. So I've been on a really big renewed kick. I get into things like I get into nuclear weapons for a while, then I get really obsessed with mRNA or something. But what I've been digging into lately is all the quantum physics stuff that's happened since I was in high school. And I found this video that is only 15 minutes long, and it is a really, really, really good visual sort of explanation, not of how some deep physics thing works, because we don't know how it works. These are unproven theories, but the concept of supersymmetry. Not regular old symmetry, but supersymmetry, which you hear said. That's a word, supersymmetry, that you hear physics people say off and on, usually in relation to string theory or brain theory or something. But very rarely is it explained in a way that any human could understand, us included, anyone, even physicists included. And this video, I think it did such a fantastic job of visually showing what the fuck they're talking about when they say the word supersymmetry, that I'm making it my thing of the day. I am not saying that I understand supersymmetry, nor will you understand it after you watch this video.
Good enough to help me understand supersymmetry.
The video you will understand what supersymmetry is and what it means. But how or why it works and whether or not it's true or any of the math is not even touched on in this video.
Okay.
But now, after watching this video, if a physicist says blah, 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 supersymmetry, blah, I can visualize in my head what they are talking about. And that is better than I've ever gotten with this concept before.
Mm-hmm. All right. So in the hockey series that the Rangers just miraculously won, right, there were disappointingly several instances of goals being allowed or disallowed or whatever that were questionable, right? You know, someone's stick was over the bar, you know, did it cross the line? We couldn't see.
Yeah. And the rules are
see.
so fussy because even if it's obvious.
Was it interference or not? Right?
The current rules of the NHL are, unless there is incontrovertible video proof, whatever the ref called on the ice stands. Like, that's the rule.
That's the rule, actually. I always heard that that's the rule in football.
That's the rule in hockey. I read the NHL handbook recently.
You sure? Okay, because
not for everything, but for was it a goal or not? That is the rule.
I have to check that again because a reliable source basically said that that's the rule in football for sure, right? That the call on the field stands unless this, absolute proof, right, in the video review. But they were like, actually, they said, this reliable person said that actually people think that's the rule in the NHL because it's the rule in football, but the rule book in the NHL is not worded the same way. So I'm going to go verify that.
All right, there might be some fussy wording. Anyway,
the point is that we had, it's whether your team wins or loses, it's disappointing to have a game decided by the refs on these close calls. Like, honestly, it could have gone either way, right? And sometimes refs make bad calls or no calls. It happens either because they missed it, because it's the playoffs and they're swallowing the whistle, because they're bad refs. They're crooked.
Or like it was literally too close for a human to objectively tell, and then like one of the cameras was busted, so they don't even have the camera angle to review it after the fact.
Deploy the technology that they could.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so the question came up as like, all right, we've seen plenty of bad calls, close calls. Everyone hates the refs right now, right?
Yep.
It's like, but what's the worst call like ever?
Ooh, because all these calls we're talking about, like the goal that was disallowed the other day and the goal that was re-allowed the other day, those are actually pretty okay calls, even though they went against the Rangers.
All of NHL history, at least, right? We can't go to all of sports history because you got things in there like hand of God in there. But it's like look at NHL history, at least NHL history that's on film, that's recorded, that we can see. What's the worst call by a ref, right? And I did not look at all the examples that people were bringing up as possibles, but this one was so bad, I just gonna hand it the trophy. I don't need to see anything else, right? In this game, which I believe is a regular season game between the Jets and the Blackhawks from...
Right, I'm watching the slow-mo while you talk.
Quite a while ago, we're pre-HD, so this has, I don't know exactly what year this is. It feels like 80s, 90s times, probably not, but it's not HD. It's really hard to see. But even in this really low quality video, recorded probably from VHS tape, you can see that what happens is a player who is behind the net, right, gets the puck in their glove. Now, the puck in the glove is not against the rules in hockey. You can put it down and start playing it. You can even whack it, right? As long as you're not passing it to your own teammate outside of the...
What the fuck? Zone. I just saw what happened. What the fuck?
So, but what you cannot do is you can't pass it to your teammate outside the defensive zone. You can't whack it into the goal, right? Like try to smack it into the goal with your hand. You also can't, it's hard to close your hand in a hockey glove, but you can do it. You're not allowed to close your hand around the puck and grip it, right? You can rest it in the glove.
Only two players on the ice are allowed to do that, and those are goalies.
That's right. And if they only in their special goalie glove. Right? I don't know if they're allowed to do it in the other glove.
I think they can use the other glove.
It's really hard to do because they don't want to let go of their stick. So
I'd have to go refer to the rule book, which I'm going to read again because I'm going to review the language on the call on the ice.
The goalie is allowed to, if you're right or left-handed as a goalie, you can put your blocker in your stick on either side you want. There's no rule that says, right? So
I wish they'd let you have two blockers or two gloves if you wanted.
Anyway, in this shitty old low-resolution VHS video, it is unambiguously clear that this player catches the puck in their glove, is not a goalie, closes their fist around the puck, gripping the puck, goes over to the goal, and tries to just drop the puck into the goal with their hand. Like a slam dunk in basketball.
Like in this video, you can see other players even reacting like, what the fuck?
That is not a legal play by any stretch of the imagination in any hockey, any ice hockey anywhere. I don't even know it's legal in any hockey anywhere. Probably not in lacrosse either.
That's the kind of thing that would not have been legal in like the old timey hockey where the rules were basically get the puck in no matter what.
Yeah. And this is reviewed by some video official somewhere. They didn't have the Toronto centralized thing in those days, but some video official in the building reviews this and calls it a good goal. And the team that won runs the fuck off the ice real quick.
Smart move, because even a classy team would struggle to resist hucking batteries on the ice.
It's, I think it's the home team that won, right?
Oh, so the YouTube video actually has a great description. The decision was made even after a, quote, video review was conducted. This sent the Chicago Blackhawks into a rage.
They should. They have every right to be enraged.
Yeah.
This is the worst call I have ever seen by any ref in any hockey anywhere.
This, other than the hand of God, this might be the worst.
By a lot.
Like, race walking, completely fine compared to this.
This is the horse shit call.
Good
like,
Lord.
Even if my team won on a call like this, I would be like, what the fuck?
Yup.
We slam dunked the puck out of the net. You can't do that. But also we have HD cameras, and I don't think even the NHL today, with its imperfect refereeing, would get this one.
This would be like in basketball if I just like grabbed the ball, ran with it without dribbling, climbed up the pole that the basket is on, sat up there, and just pushed it down through the top.
Harlem Globetrotters get away with it.
You know, I would love to see the Harlem Globetrotters equivalent for hockey.
It's probably not going to be as cool.
I think it'd be pretty cool. The problem is I think it would be extremely dangerous.
Have you seen the actual Harlem Globetrotters?
Oh,
We can
yeah.
Start there.
Yeah. I grew up in Detroit. I saw them at Cobo Hall a couple times as a kid.
When I was in high school, at my high school, in the gym, the same gym, right, I went to see the Harlem Globetrotters versus. Who do you think they were versus?
So you wouldn't ask me unless it wasn't the normal answer.
It's not good.
Versus your own school's basketball team?
No. It was the Harlem Globetrotters versus the New York Football Giants. Or at least enough representatives from the New York Football Giants.
That's pretty fantastic.
To make up a basketball team that would get demolished by the Harlem Globetrotters.
In fact, the last time I saw the Harlem Globetrotters was in a dual event that also featured a crisscross concert.
And the only Giants player that I specifically remember being there was Stephen Baker, the touchdown maker, because his name is Stephen Baker, the touchdown maker. Get that guy.
All right. To the meta moment. Put my metadata marker. Oh, I still have that Wikipedia article on fermions open. In the meta moment, the GeekNights Book Club book, which we're going to do the show on within the next month or so. So get reading if you haven't started reading. Nine Fox Gambit, Korean sci-fi, distant future, very like culture book distant future in terms of the kinds of abstract, ridiculous technology. But the further I get into this book, I'm getting near the end. I love all the characters. They're really fun.
There's not that many characters.
Yeah, but it is hard to summarize this book as anything other than calendars are violent and they're a problem.
Yep, they sure are.
This book is about violent calendars in a
Calendars
distant...
in the real world are violent too.
Yeah. Well, we could always use the metric calendar. That existed for a hot minute.
Is, the calendar and the clock in and of themselves are violence against humanity.
Yep. Go read up on why
Regardless
American
of their structure.
Go read why American public schools when they were formed as a system, used bells the way that they did, and that'll teach you everything you need to know about the violence of calendars and clocks.
All right. Any other meta moment stuff? We're working on the website big time. I'm working now on the features involving, the uploading of the MP3 part.
And I am, in fact, this episode, I am using to test out my pipeline for some of the metadata involved in this process.
Yeah, so other than the uploading of the MP3, the only other major features that are missing is the automatic, posting to the other social networks, which I've already implemented in the past, just to re-implement it better. And then, of course,
little mad that every place except Patreon has an API.
No, not every place, but some do, some don't. But the other major thing is the transferring of the data from the old database to the new database, a little ETL action. That's going to be some effort. So, but I have some techniques to make it a little better. Anyway, so that's coming along.
Yep. Otherwise,
really happen.
COVID is skyrocketing. Obviously, we're not going to any cons anytime soon. There's a good chance, unless things go real crazy, at least I will be at PAX West. But just like the last two PAXs, that'll be for a couple hours to do a panel, and then I'm going to be off doing some other non-PAX things and some business things.
I've not decided to go or not to go to PAX West yet, but it's not looking likely. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, considering what the COVID numbers, especially the hospitalization numbers, look like, even in New York, even in the last 48 hours, it's not a great situation.
Anyway, let's go to the main bit.
All right, scanners. So
we miraculously came up with a main bit that we somehow hadn't done yet. Hooray!
Not Scanners, the 1981 Canadian science fiction horror movie.
No, not that one. The things that really people don't use anymore these days, except for a very few, artistic and whatever printing professionals, I guess. And even some of them don't use them.
Well, it's interesting. So what is a scanner in a nutshell? It's a device, which, remember, these appeared and were used long before things like smartphones or even digital cameras existed. To give you the context, you really got to remember that context. In the old days, if you had a computer of any kind and you wanted to get an image into that computer, you had originally one option, and that one option was draw it pixels with pixels somehow. And then an invention appeared to capture photons and generate an image file from photons. That is the origin of both digital cameras and the origin of scanners, essentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had, the copy machine, right? So the original scanners, right, as far as I'm aware, at least for computers, weren't too different from, the mechanism in, copy machines of the time.
Yeah.
The only difference was that instead of immediately just printing a copy straight away.
Well, right? No, that's already kind of, because a lot of copy machines were not really digital, and we're using
you're talking about the original Xeroxes. Those worked completely differently.
So once you got to the point where there was a memory buffer with the image that was being scanned that was used to put the output to the paper, that's the era you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly, right? So you think about it, right? It's like you had these devices that were somewhat, in principle, like a laser printer with a scanner attached directly to it, right? It's like it's scanned and it immediately laser print. We've done a show on printers and how laser printers work, right? So you can just listen to that. It's a 100 years old episode. So when we had computers, right? I think in the 90s, the scanners came into existence, at least as an expensive consumer product, the flatbed scanner. And you hook it up to your SCSI ports, your parallel ports, or your serial ports, or whatever, before USB existed. And you slap a piece of paper down on there, you close the lid, and it would scan it slowly.
Yep. Actually, my first scanner. So I never had a scanner that we owned that I had access to directly, just in our house, until late middle school, and we actually got a SCSI scanner that was about 10 times faster than a serial port or printer port scanner.
Yep. I mean, I didn't really need or buy one until like after college, and I got a USB one because they were so cheap. And then I stopped. I wasn't using it after a while, and then I didn't buy another one until I wanted to scan photos and negatives, and then I bought a photo-y one, and I still have that. So.
Yep.
But if I wasn't doing photo-y scanning, I wouldn't have the scanner either.
Yep.
Right?
So I just remember as a kid, using computers in the school. One day in 6th grade, the teacher was like, "So the school has a scanner now. Everyone's allowed to bring in one picture, and we're gonna scan that picture for you and give you a bitmap file on a floppy disk." And it was like, it is hard to express how fucking excited we all were to do this.
Yeah, no, it's pretty, it was pretty amazing back then, right?
Yeah.
To be able to just take something, that only existed, an image that only existed like on a piece of paper, right, of some kind, and then to get that image onto the computer without having to draw it or anything. It's like you could put that now on a website or share it, right? It's like now taking a photo and sharing it is like the most basic common functionality, but it's also like the most fun thing. It's like people still love the fuck out of doing that.
Yep.
Like that's like one of the number one uses of phones is take pictures and share them, right? So it's like that wasn't possible to do. And then if you had a scanner, you could kind of do it, and it's like it was pretty exciting, right? Yeah.
So the basic kinds of scanners that existed and still exist were the sort of the flatbed ones that you can put a document or a picture or really anything in. It looks like a Xerox machine. There's the ones that are sort of sheet fed, so it looks like a printer. You put a piece of paper, usually a document in it, and it'll just pull it through and scan it.
Yeah, that's not too different from the flatbed one. The difference is that in the flatbed one, right, the bar that's doing the scanning is moving and the paper is still, whereas in the sheet-fed one, it's like, well, the bar is still and the paper moves across.
There are pros and cons to both approaches, but that doesn't matter that much, and we'll get to that, at least for consumers.
If you're scanning negatives, right, you can scan film negatives, the flatbed way. But they also have like these drum scanners that are pretty popular.
Yep. I would say that photo scanners and negative
you're not
scanners.
gonna have one of those at home. Photo labs are going to use those.
Yep.
And the reason they use those is because you can scan negatives very quickly with the drum scanner. Right?
Yep. Basically,
it's like you get speed and quality, and the downside is big machine.
Yep. Photo scanners and negative scanners that are dedicated tend to be better at that task than just generic scanners for a lot of reasons. And
nowadays it's getting a little fishy in those regards.
Well, it is because basically, I have the same scanner that we had forever, and the thing that I have the most to say about with scanners is that consumer grade scanners really haven't been improved in any way in at least 15, maybe 20 years.
There's really no need to, because the only thing you would use it for is like, getting documents into PDFs probably, like, some...
Which is what I use my, old as crap CanoScan for.
And it's like, the resolution is going to be high enough that you can print a copy of the document and it's going to be very, very good, right?
Yep.
Or email the PDF to someone, it's going to be very good, right? Email the PDF to one of those fax forwarding emails and it'll come out of a fax machine somewhere and look worse than when it started, right? It's like,
but I found the image scanning on those things is not great. Like, it's okay, but it's not great.
Well, you can tweak it depending, but
most of them max out at 300 DPI.
Yeah, it's not professional level, but it's good enough for any of the use cases a normal person has for a scanner.
Yeah.
Right. Well beyond, you can scan a book with it slowly. Right?
But
there's the book scanners that turn the pages and stuff, right?
Yep.
Those
but basically, there's cheapo scanners like what we just described that are like, if you go to any store, those are the scanners you're going to see for sale. You can just buy them. They're like under $100 usually, and they work fine. And then there's nothing in the middle. There's no middle of the road prosumer scanner.
That's what I have. I have prosumer scanner.
How much you pay for that? And is it materially better than a CanoScan LIDE? Because I'm looking at scanners right now, and it's between $80 and $200 for a regular scanner, and then it's $500 and up.
If you want to buy an Epson Perfection V600 photo scanner, the MSRP is $300, right? So it's like the only reason that you would buy this, right? It basically has no function, over a cheapo scanner other than the fact that it's high resolution enough and has, color correcting tools and whatnot so that you can actually scan photos and negatives. If you're not,
How good are those? I'm actually curious. How good are those color correcting tools?
I mean, you have to use them, right? So, like the automatic ones are obviously automatic ones, right? It's like you have to, you just do it yourself. Some people use them and some people just scan and then go to Photoshop, right? So it's sort of up to you, either way. But it's like that's the only use case that the prosumer use case for scanning is photos, right? There isn't another reason that you would need higher resolution or better colors than a cheap scanner unless it's photos. What else could you scan in the world?
The only other use case that would edge into prosumer would be the bulk scanning of documents. Like you're scanning contracts and you're scanning you're going through every document your family ever generated and scanning them, that kind of thing, where the sheet fed advanced features of batching the scanning so you don't have to sit there and scan everything.
You'll usually go somewhere to do that, right? Like you can go, for example, to your local copy shop, right? And you could load a stack of papers into the left side of one of those big multi-function scanner printer copier things.
And basically tell it, spit out a whole bunch of PDFs.
Well, you can tell it to make one PDF with many pages. You can tell it to make a bunch of PDFs. You can tell it all kinds of things, and it'll just email you the result or send you a download link to the result, right, to your phone. It's like, you can just walk in with papers, put them in, push the buttons, walk out, put some quarters in there, right? Or probably tap your phone to pay, and then that's it, right?
But
if you have an office that you still go to that has one of those machines, you could do the same thing, right? It'll email you the results to your work email, right?
So what I found though is that all the consumer level scanners, they pretty much even a one from 20 years ago works just fine. Like a CanoScan whatever from 20 years ago, identical quality to whatever the latest CanoScan is. The only difference is that they probably scan, the new ones probably scan faster. They probably use USB 3 or something more modern than the USB 2 that the old ones used. Maybe. But maybe
a lot of them nowadays come in combos with printers and copier scanner, all in one. And they'll be wireless, right? So they'll get on your Wi-Fi so that all the devices in your home can use them. So that way, it's been that way for quite a while, 5 to 10 years, if not probably 10 plus years, where you just plug this in somewhere in your house within Wi-Fi range. It doesn't need to connect to anything with a cable other than power, right? You fill it up with ink and paper, and now you can scan, print, fax, etc., copy, and you can send things from your phone or literally any device on your home network to it to print, or scan something on it and send that to any device, right? It's you could put a piece of paper, get the piece of paper on a phone, tablet, whatever. And that's what I imagine if you are a household in the world today and you still, for some reason, need to scan and print, that's the kind of device that you're going to have.
But where I was going, all those old consumer scanners from 20 plus years ago, they work just fine today. But almost categorically, the companies that sold that hardware just don't have drivers for any modern operating system. And
because it's an old unsupported device, why would they update their driver? Right?
Despite the fact
you can often use the generic. There's a standard called TWAIN.
I was going to bring up TWAIN.
I never knew what TWAIN stood for my whole life. I still don't. I guess I could Google it right now and find out.
I look it up every time it comes up, and then I forget it immediately after.
TWAIN is basically some standard protocol for scanners to talk to computers. And
oh no! You know why we never remember? It's not actually an acronym. It's a backronym. Okay. It was just called TWAIN, and then people made up what it stood for.
Oh, okay. But anyway, it's basically a protocol for scanners and computers to talk to each other in a standard way so that you could get a computer that knows how to speak TWAIN and a scanner that knows how to speak TWAIN. And then, look, you can scan even if you don't have a driver. The problem is that the drivers often, the official drivers for a particular scanner will often provide you with lots and lots of extra features that are often not part of the TWAIN standard.
And depending on what kind of scanner it is, they're either helpful or annoying.
Right. So, and then if you just use TWAIN, like a generic scanner driver, your options for scanning are going to be very, very limited, right? It's pretty much going to be scan a page, the end, right? That's all you can do.
Yeah, well, unless the software does. So I actually have been using TWAIN quite a bit because I've been doing a lot of scanning over the last few years for a bunch of reasons. But so I'm going to read first. Here is actually what TWAIN stands for, unless this is someone has vandalized Wikipedia just recently. Quote, the word TWAIN is not an acronym, but a backronym. The official website notes that the word TWAIN is from Kipling's The Ballad of East and West and the line, and never the twain shall meet, reflecting the difficulty at the time of connecting scanners to personal computers.
Uh-huh.
That's the best explanation for the name of a computer thing that I've seen in a long time. That's actually kind of funny.
All right, I learned something today.
I learned something too. This is why I keep forgetting this every time I look it up. But I have an ancient Canon scanner that there's no driver on Earth for a modern computer. It plugs into a USB 3, but it's definitely just USB 2. But the hardware is totally fine. So the way I use it is I'll either you have Photoshop use TWAIN to control it directly, scan directly into Photoshop, or I'll have Adobe Acrobat use it directly.
Adobe Acrobat directly scanning is pretty good, actually.
Adobe Acrobat directly scanning, like talking about the side benefits of paying for Creative Cloud if you need some Adobe software and you just get everything else along with the ride. If you've got, say, a bunch of old documents like, I don't know, car maintenance receipts or leases that you want to scan, like you want to throw away old papers, but you want to scan them in and save them as PDFs in case you need them to give to a lawyer 20 years from now. Adobe Acrobat is a really great way to do that because you just batch up these scannings and it'll just make a PDF for you one by one.
Yep. All right. So the thing I want to talk about that's like, I guess not super recent, but basically the current deal of scanning is that for high resolution, high quality scans these days, a lot of people like in the photo world, but also other worlds, right, have basically abandoned scanners, right, as the way to go. Instead, people are just using digital cameras. It's like, if you just take whatever it is that you want to scan, say a negative or a photo or magazine or whatever, you just line it up flat on some surface, right? Light it appropriately with lights, right? To get evenly lit.
Yep.
Get a digital camera with an appropriate lens. Mount the camera aiming straight down, right? Line everything up, do the manual focus and take a picture. And that's going to be the digital cameras now, even if you use your phone, are so good, right? That like, first of all, this is going to, the quality, it might beat almost all scanners.
Especially because a lot of apps or a lot of pipelines to do this with phones will do things like if you take the photo at an angle, it'll correct for that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of software that helps this process, makes it easier, makes it better. But also, in terms of the speed of the process, it's like, if you want to scan something, it's like, all right, line it up, change these settings, push scan, wait, get a document. Okay, it's like, right? If you just taken photos as scanning, right? It's like, click, there it is. It's already goes directly from the physical world into the exact end place. You're bypassing all this like scanning process, all the manual labor of scanning things, right? It's just sort of eliminated, right? It's like, oh, I just now have an SD card that has all my files on it. It's like, you're good to go. The only times that this process, right, might be a little cumbersome is the final topic of scanning, which has been, I guess, one is OCR, right, which stands for optical character recognition. And this is sort of not necessarily scanning itself, but a post-scanning process where, okay, you scanned something, you've turned a physical, flat document into an image, a JPEG, a TIFF, or whatever image file. But you didn't actually want to create a raster image of a thing like a photo.
Yep.
You wanted the words in some alphabet translated not into a JPEG, but into a text
So
file,
like scan in an essay and then be able to search through the text in that essay like it's a text file, not like it's an image.
Right. So the software to do OCR has gotten better over time. The image resolution is better, so that especially if you're OCRing something that was printed, right, out of another computer or is like an officially printed document, it's in English especially, and you're using modern software, the results are going to be very, very good.
This used to not be the case. I remember paying a lot of money as a kid, our family, to get some, I forget what it was called, but there were some OCR softwares you could buy.
Oh, yeah. In the 90s, you could get on CD-ROM, you could buy an OCR thing, and it's like they work kind of.
They work kind of, is the way I'd say.
Okay.
I pirated one that worked better.
It worked well enough that it was better to do that and then correct the document than to just type it all in by hand.
Yep.
But it was still a pain in the ass. Nowadays, you might barely have to type anything in by hand at all.
Yep. Adobe Acrobat in particular, like, just does it. If I scan a document and it sees it's a document, it automatically does all the OCR it can, and it is just 100% accurate unless my document is really fucked up.
Or the scan is fucked up or whatever.
Yeah.
But the place the OCR matters the most is when you want to scan a printed book into an ebook, right? And so that's where you have, libraries and places have these special book scanners that basically hold the book open, right? Take photos of both pages, turn the page, take photos of both pages.
And that's when you get into non-destructive scanning versus destructive scanning. Like tearing a book apart to scan it will be better than carefully scanning it in a way that doesn't destroy it.
But if it's a rare special book, you can't do that.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas if it's a normal old book, it's like go right ahead.
Yep.
But if it's a newer book, you don't even need to do that because it started life as an ebook. It's only this narrow few decades of books that were printed, but they're not rare and valuable, so we can tear apart one copy of each to get them scanned.
But also, people's pipelines are different in terms of what they do with documents. Like, most people don't even have a desktop computer anymore. A lot of people don't even have laptops anymore. So increasingly, I think the way people will scan things, like one, they won't have photos to scan anymore. Physical photos to scan are just because we're old enough to have physical photos lying around, or a relative dies and you get their pile of physical photos. You realize no one ever scanned them in, and you scan them all in one go. So
I think this is what we're seeing is even though there's still plenty of stuff in the world that needs scanning, right? We're seeing people who are younger than us, their whole lives did not include anything that needs scanning.
Yeah,
right?
most of the teenagers today, there's nothing, there's no essay they wrote by hand that they will ever need.
A paper bill in the mail. They've never filed taxes on paper. They've never done any, right? It's like there's nothing in their lives to scan. So it's really an older generation of people that have paper things to scan in their lives.
Yep.
And if they either A, scan everything, then they don't need a scanner anymore because their lives are now digital, or B, they die. And now it's like, well, right, that's it. So the only people who really need scanners now, right, in this world where people are living fully digital lives, are people who are still living in parts of the world where it's not fully digital, and they're going to transition. They haven't made this transition
or
yet.
People with professional interests in needing to scan.
Archivists, artists, photographers, someone with some reason, right, to scan. And so, we probably could make, if they wanted to, really fucking amazing scanners if someone really tried. But just the use case, the demand is already dropping off and is only going to drop off further as, it's like scanning solved this temporary problem, and it's there for those who need it, and fewer and fewer people need it as time goes on. And that's it.
Like, what do I scan now? Like, after I did all that big bulk scanning of all my old documents, like, I got some work done on my car recently. The guy had a paper bill. So because I
tell you the thing,
nah, he emailed me videos of all the work he did, but the actual bill and everything was a printout. So I scanned it and then I shredded that document.
Yep. There you go.
And maybe I do this every couple months. I have one thing that I scan because I want to throw away the piece of paper. That's it. That's the only reason I have a scanner.
Yeah, I think the only thing I scan is really my lease is still on paper, I guess, and I renew it.
Oh yeah, I do scan the lease in. So every 2 years I
think
rescan
that's
the lease.
Only paper thing I have left that's
Yeah.
All right.
Good enough. It's a good spot to end.
Okay, I'm gonna eat the food. I think it arrived.